There is a moment most people know but few talk about. You are sitting in a meeting, or at a dinner table, or standing in a room full of people who seem to have it all figured out, and you have something to say. No, you have something to say. The thought is right there, fully formed, pressing against the inside of your chest like a fist looking for a door. And then someone else speaks. They say something similar to what you were thinking, maybe not even as well formed, maybe even a little off the mark, and the room responds. People nod, someone laughs. A decision gets made, and you sit there quietly, your unspoken words dissolving, back into the silence thinking, why couldn't that have been me? If that moment feels familiar, this audiobook was written for you. Not for people who have never struggled to find the right words. Not for natural-born orators who command attention without effort. This was written for the person who has a sharp mind but a hesitant voice. The person who knows what they want to say but freezes when the moment arrives. The person who leaves conversations feeling like they left the best version of themselves behind. Because here is the hard truth that most communication books refuse to say out loud. Intelligence alone will not get you where you want to go. In today's world, how you speak matters as much as what you know. Often it matters more. Cameron Reed understood this not from a place of natural confidence, but from years of watching brilliant people be overlooked and average ideas win rooms, simply because of how they were delivered. The insights in this book are not about becoming someone you are not. They are not about performing a character or memorizing scripts. They are about learning to let the intelligence you already have come through clearly, powerfully, and on demand. 8 lessons, each one small enough to hold in your hand, each one sharp enough to change the trajectory of a conversation, a career, a relationship, or a negotiation permanently. Let us begin with the first and perhaps most foundational insight, one that sounds almost too simple until you feel its weight. The way you speak is not a reflection of your intelligence. It is a learned skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. Most people grow up believing that some people are just naturally articulate, that confidence in speech is something you either have or you do not. This belief is not just wrong, it is actively harmful. It causes people to give up before they start, tells them that their hesitation, their stumbling, their tendency to trail off mid-sentence is a character flaw rather than a habit pattern, and habit patterns can be changed. Think about what happens inside your mind in the seconds before you speak in a high-stakes situation. Your brain does not treat public speaking or assertive conversation like a neutral activity. It treats it like a threat. Your nervous system, which was designed tens of thousands of years ago to protect you from predators, cannot distinguish between a lion in tall grass and your boss waiting for your response in a tense meeting. The fear response is real, physiological, and not a sign of weakness. The first step to speaking smarter is understanding that your hesitation is not stupidity. It is biology. When once you stop fighting your own nervous system and start working with it, everything changes. The practical implication of this is immediate and actionable. Before any high-stakes conversation, your body needs a signal that you are safe. Research draws on work in behavioral psychology showing that slow, deliberate breathing, specifically exhaling longer than you inhale, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and dials down the threat response within 60 to 90 seconds. This is not a relaxation technique. This is neurological preparation. Athletes use it. Surgeons use it. Special operations soldiers use it before entering a building. And it works just as powerfully before you walk into a negotiation, a job interview, a difficult conversation with a partner, or a pitch meeting with a potential client. 60 seconds of conscious breathing changes your neurochemistry. It lowers your cortisol, increases your clarity, and shifts your brain from reactive to strategic. That is not a small thing. That is the difference between the version of you that goes blank and the version that says exactly what needed to be said. The second insight builds on this foundation and addresses something that derails even experienced speakers: the trap of over. There is a particular kind of communicator, and you may recognize yourself here, who, when nervous, compensates by talking more. They add qualifiers. They backtrack. They explain the explanation. They say things like, well, what I mean is, or I might be wrong, but, or this is probably a stupid question. But each of these phrases is a small act of self-erasure, and cumulatively, they teach the listener to discount everything that follows. The psychological principle at work here is called hedging, and while it feels like humility, it is actually received as uncertainty, and uncertainty, in high-stakes situations, costs you credibility. Red makes a compelling distinction between being thoughtful and being tentative. Thoughtful means you take a moment before you speak. Tentative means you apologize for what you are about to say before you say it. The fix is not to pretend you are certain when you are not. The fix is to change the architecture of how you express uncertainty. Instead of "I might be wrong, but I think the deadline should be moved," you say, "Based on what I am seeing, moving the deadline makes sense." You have expressed the same level of certainty, but you have done it in a way that leads with reasoning rather than apology. This is not a trick. This is a fundamental reframing of how you position yourself in conversation. Do it consistently for 2 weeks and watch how differently people respond to you. The third lesson is one that will feel counterintuitive the first time you hear it. Silence is not the enemy of smart communication. It is one of its most powerful tools. We live in a culture that treats silence as awkward, as a gap to be filled, as evidence that someone does not know what they are talking about. But the most effective communicators in the world, the ones who command rooms, close deals, resolve conflicts, and inspire teams, have mastered the art of the strategic pause. When you allow silence to exist in a conversation, several things happen simultaneously. The listener's attention sharpens. The weight of what you just said has space to land, and you signal, without saying a word, that you are not afraid of the moment. Consider the difference between a speaker who rushes from point to point, filling every breath with words, and a speaker who makes a strong statement and then simply stops. The first speaker sounds like they are running away from something. The second sounds like they arrive somewhere. In business contexts, the pause is particularly powerful after stating a price, making a proposal, or asking a critical question. Sales professionals who have trained in strategic silence consistently outperform those who rush to fill the quiet. This is because the first person to speak after a tense silence usually concedes something. When you are comfortable in the silence, you'll hold your position with dignity. Practicing silence does not mean becoming mysterious or withholding. It means learning to trust that your words are enough. It means not chasing the listener's reaction with more words before they have had a chance to process the first ones. Start small. After you make a point in your next conversation, count silently to 3 before continuing. Notice how the dynamic shifts. Notice how people lean in slightly. Notice how the room starts to feel like it belongs to you. Practicing silence does not mean becoming mysterious or withholding. It means learning to trust that your words are enough. It means not chasing the listener's reaction with more words before they have had a chance to process the first ones. Start small. After you make a point in your next conversation, count silently to 3 before continuing. Notice how the dynamic shifts. Notice how people lean in slightly. Notice how the room starts to feel like it belongs to you. The fourth insight is about the architecture of compelling speech, and it centers on a structure that Reed calls the clarity stack. Most people, when asked to explain something complex, start at the beginning and move forward. They provide context, then background, then more context, and eventually get to the point. By that time, the listener has mentally checked out or lost the thread. The clarity stack inverts this. You lead with a point, then you provide the reason, then you offer the evidence or the example, then you restate the point briefly with the confidence of someone who has just proven something. This structure works in emails, in presentations, in difficult conversations, in negotiations, and in casual explanations. It respects the listener's time and attention. It signals that you know what you think and you are not afraid to say it directly. The real-world application of this is enormous. In a world where attention is the scarcest resource and most decisions are made in seconds, the person who can lead with clarity and follow with substance has an extraordinary advantage. Think about the AI economy we are living in right now, where everyone has access to the same information, where research takes seconds and content is generated on demand. What differentiates you is no longer what you know. It is how clearly and compellingly you can communicate what you know. The clarity stack is not a rhetorical trick. It is an economic skill. It is the difference between a freelancer who can charge 3 times the market rate and one who cannot. Because when you can articulate your value clearly and quickly, that value becomes undeniable. The fifth lesson is perhaps the most underestimated, and it has to do with the language of confidence specifically. The difference between words that signal certainty and words that signal hesitation. This is not about faking confidence you do not feel. It is about understanding that language shapes perception, and perception shapes reality in social and professional contexts. When you say, I think we should probably consider maybe shifting the strategy, you have just buried a reasonable idea under 4 layers of uncertainty. When you say the strategy needs to shift, here's why. You have said the same thing in a way that invites respect. The idea did not change. The packaging changed everything. Reed draws on fascinating research in linguistics and organizational psychology here. Studies consistently show that people in meetings who speak with more declarative sentences, who use fewer filler words, who pause before responding rather than immediately and anxiously filling space, are rated as significantly more competent and trustworthy even when the actual content of what they say is equivalent to someone who speaks tentatively. This means you could be saying the right things and still being underestimated, simply because of the linguistic packaging. The most common filler words to eliminate are, and basically, not because these words are grammatically wrong, but because they signal that your brain is searching, and listeners interpret searching as uncertainty. Replace fillers with intentional pauses. Searching in silence sounds like thinking. Searching Out loud sounds like floundering. The sixth insight shifts the focus from how you speak to who you are listening to. Because smart communication is not a monologue, it is a dynamic, adaptive process. One of the biggest mistakes confident-sounding people make is mistaking volume and assertiveness for effective communication. They speak well but listen poorly, and listening poorly is expansive. It costs you deals, relationships, trust, and influence. Reed introduces a concept he calls strategic listening, which is not passive absorption but active, intentional engagement designed to deepen understanding and make the speaker feel genuinely heard. Strategic listening involves three components: reflecting back what you heard in compressed form, asking the one question that opens the conversation further rather than narrowing it, and resisting the urge to respond until you are sure you understand the other person's actual concern, not just their surface request. In business contexts, this is transformative. Most salespeople listen for the moment they can respond. Most negotiators listen for weaknesses to exploit. But the communicators who build lasting influence listen for the underlying need, the unspoken worry, the real ask beneath the stated ask. When you speak to that, you change the nature of the conversation entirely. You move from transactional to relational, and relational conversations build the kind of trust that turns contacts into allies, clients into advocates, and difficult conversations into productive ones. The seventh insight is one that becomes increasingly critical as the world becomes more mediated by screens, platforms, and asynchronous communication. Speaking smart in the digital age requires a different set of skills than speaking well in person, and most people have not updated their communication style to match the medium. In an era where so much professional communication happens over video calls, voice messages, Slack threads, and recorded pitches, your ability to translate physical presence into digital presence determines your reach and your income. Red identifies three principles for high-impact digital communication. First, front-load everything. In digital environments, you have even less time to capture attention than in person. Your first sentence, your subject line, the opening 5 seconds of your voice note, these have to carry the full weight of your intent. Second, use the listener's name. In digital communication, personalization is the most powerful signal of genuine engagement. Third, close with clarity. Every digital communication should end with a clear next step, a direct question, or a specific call to action. Ambiguous endings create friction. Friction kills momentum. In a world where most people are managing dozens of conversations simultaneously, the communicator who makes the path forward obvious wins. The eighth and final lesson is the one that ties all others together, and it is this: speaking smart is not ultimately about technique. It is about identity. Specifically, it is about the story you tell yourself about who you are as a communicator. Research in behavioral psychology shows consistently that self-concept drives behavior more powerfully than skill training alone. You can learn every technique in this book and still revert to your old patterns under pressure if your internal identity is not shifted. The most sustainable change comes not from telling yourself to speak differently, but from genuinely beginning to see yourself as someone who communicates clearly, powerfully, and with confidence. This is not magical thinking. It is the practical application of identity-based habit formation. The way you accelerate this shift is through what Red calls evidence accumulation. Every time you apply one of these lessons, every time you pause, instead of filling space, every time you lead with your point, every time you speak a declarative sentence instead of a hedged one, every time you hold the silence, you collect evidence for a new self-concept. One piece of evidence does not change a belief, but 20 pieces, 50 pieces, 100 small moments of speaking better than you did before, those add up to a new identity. And from that identity, speaking smart stops being something you practice and becomes something you are. This matters more now than at any previous point in human history, because we are living through a moment of radical economic and social transformation. Artificial intelligence is automating the predictable. Automation is replacing the routine. What remains, what machines cannot replicate, is the deeply human capacity for persuasion, connection, trust building, emotional intelligence, and the ability to communicate nuance in real time. The people who will thrive in this economy are not necessarily the most technically skilled or the most credentialed. They are the ones who can walk into a room, or onto a screen, or into a conversation, and make people feel understood, inspired, and compelled to act. That is the economic value of speaking smart. It is not soft. It is the hardest currency there is. So here is what is at stake if you walk away from these lessons and return to old habits. It is not just missed speaking opportunities. It is the negotiation where you undersell yourself because you could not hold the silence after you named your price. It is the promotion that went to someone less qualified but more articulate. It is the relationship that drifted because you could not find the words for the conversation that needed to happen. It is the client you lost to a competitor who told a cleaner story. It is the idea that changed nothing because it was never delivered with enough conviction to move anyone. These are not small losses. Multiplied across a career, across a lifetime, across every relationship and opportunity that required you to speak and be heard, they are enormous. You already have the mind, you already have the ideas, you already have something worth saying. What these 8 lessons offer is the delivery system that makes all of it count, not someday, not after you feel ready. Right now, in the next conversation you have, in the next moment when you feel that fist of unspoken thought pressing against your chest, looking for a door. This time, open it. Speak clearly. Hold the silence. Lead with your point. Trust your voice, because the world does not reward the best kept. It's thoughts who rewards the ones that get said.